Years into the future, a spaceship known as Ark One suffers a massive catastrophe, causing the remaining crew members to awaken 1 year before their intended arrival on the new planet, Proxima b. Now, without their commanding officers and faced with limited resources, the crew must band together to stay on course and survive. Somewhere deep in space, a spaceship filled with cryogenic pods shakes violently. A beam falls and crashes into one pod, waking Lieutenant Sharon Garnett from her cryostasis. After noticing a massive hull breach, she quickly activates her compression suit and moves to wake everyone else. Sharon goes to Lieutenant Spencer Lane and explains the situation. They quickly vacated their fellow crew members from the area and helped them with their suits and helmets. Meanwhile, another beam crushes Commander Susan Ingram's pod, so Baylor Trent tries to remove the heavy metal structure. Sharon rips the crying crew member away and forces him to don his helmet and run to safety. As the ceiling collapses, everyone starts floating due to the lack of gravity. Sharon tries to lock the sleeper pod bay but can't due to an obstruction in the ship's external wheel. She manages to release it, and the wheel spins again, reactivating gravity. Sharon restarts the ship's life support system, allowing everyone to breathe without their helmets. Sharon and Spencer then rush to inform their commanding officers about the situation. However, they discover that their bay has been destroyed. Dr. Sanjivani Kabir tends to the crew members in the med bay and explains they mustn't believe rumors regarding the catastrophe. She assists Angus Medford, who deactivates his suit too soon, causing his atrophic muscles from prolonged cryostasis to disable him from walking. Sharon then visits the med bay to find Lieutenant James Bryce soaking in an ice bath, and she informs him that he needs to help her control the bridge. As they make their way to the command center, James tells her to ask one of the commanders instead, but Sharon reveals that they're all dead. Elsewhere, Eva Markovich charges the crew's helmets and instructs Jasper Dades to fetch refill tanks, but he refuses, claiming it's below his pay grade. Harris Beckner sneaks inside, and she quickly closes the door so no one sees them together since couples are banned from boarding the ship. They kiss but are interrupted when they're ordered to convene in the mess hall. Angus makes his way to the hall, where he sits next to Alicia Nevins, who specializes in waste management. After Angus reveals he's in horticulture, Alicia remembers that he was the person who grew crops in the Mojave Desert. The three lieutenants announce they still have 1 year to go before reaching their destination, Proxima b, much to the crew's horror. Sharon then explains that they're unaware of what hit the ship, while Spencer informs them that their sleeper pod bays were destroyed, their storage unit is now lost, and their water supply is extremely limited. Sharon says they'll have to repurpose their water recycling unit, but until then, they must follow tight rations. She adds that they lost most of their food supply and only have enough for 6 weeks. Sharon reveals that they lost all of their commanders and that the 3 lieutenants are the only high-ranking officers left. Sharon appoints herself as their leader, which the 2 men quickly question, but she explains that out of the 3 of them, she has the most experience and knowledge about the ship, thus making her the most capable candidate. Spencer is visibly unhappy, but Sharon delivers a rousing speech to raise the crew's morale about how they were all chosen to save mankind. The following day, they hold a funeral service for their commanders, and Jasper sidles up to Baylor to ask him about his relationship with Commander Susan, angering Baylor. Meanwhile, James commends Sharon for her speech the previous night. However, he also has issues with her declaring herself the leader, but Sharon reminds him that she was the only one who stepped up. Angus then chases after Sharon and tells her to follow him. After the funeral, the crew heads to the mess hall for breakfast. Jasper receives his meal, and the man explains that everyone will only receive 500-calorie meals twice daily to save rations. Meanwhile, Angus leads Sharon into the storage bay and shows her a container full of fertile soil that he smuggled from Earth. He explains that he can grow crops, but he'll need power for his agricultural LED lights. Concurrently, Kat Brandis sneaks into the women's locker room to shower. However, the head of security, Felix Strickland, catches her. Kat tries to beguile him, but he stops her and hands her a towel. Later, Alicia rushes to the storage unit and finds Angus setting up his biofarm. Realizing she works in waste management, Angus asks her for the necessary ingredients for fertilizer, much to her dismay. Elsewhere, Baylor is watching an old video message from his family when Spencer walks in on him. Baylor then asks Spencer if he regrets volunteering for the mission, but the lieutenant says he doesn't, especially because of the people back on Earth who depend on them. Suddenly, the lights shut down. One crew member informs Spencer that Sharon has been rerouting the power to the biofarm, angering him. At the storage bay, they turn the lights on to start farming. Spencer storms in and confronts Sharon for failing to consult her fellow lieutenants before approving the risky biofarm project. Sharon apologizes but reprimands him for confronting her publicly. Later, the lieutenants, including Dr. Kabir, Felix, and Eva, former counsel. James is all for farming since it helps mitigate their food crisis, but Spencer argues they're wasting too many resources on it. However, Sharon explains that everything they do from now on entails risk and that they need to make tough choices to survive. Afterward, Sharon heads back to the storage unit, and she pushes Angus to continue the biofarm. Eva goes down to the engineering unit, where she meets Harris and tells him they must rebuild the water recycling unit. The lights turn back on, and she instructs the team to find the parts necessary to fix the system. At the medical bay, Baylor visits Dr. Kabir for a physical and reveals he's having trouble breathing. Suddenly, an alarm blares, stating that the oxygen on the ship has been depleted. Dr. Kabir hands him a mask while she leaves to grab their helmets. All crew members then activate their suits and rush for their helmets. Unfortunately, Eva and her engineering team get separated when a door closes between them, and the same thing happens to Baylor and Kabir. On the bridge, James explains to Sharon that the ship goes into lockdown once it hits 15% oxygen levels and that the diagnostics are malfunctioning. James orders everyone to find the chief of life support, while Spencer leaves with one of the crew members to locate the problem. Sharon discovers that Jasper Dades is the head of life support and pages him. At the medical bay, Baylor is struggling to breathe when he finds the oxygen tanks. Fearful, Eva orders Harris to open the door immediately and reveals that the helmets on their side are oxygen depleted while hers are all charged. Elsewhere, Jasper hides upon hearing Sharon's message. He spots Spencer and some crew members trying to pinpoint the exact location of the anomaly. Jasper tries to get away but runs into Felix, who's also looking for him. One of the engineering crew members faints, so Harris removes his helmet to save him. He assures Eva he'll be all right, but she urges him to conserve his air. Eva calls for help from the bridge, and James tells Sharon they can't open the door without access to the life support system. Felix then brings Jasper to the bridge, but the latter pretends his helmet is malfunctioning, making him unable to hear their orders, so they give him a new helmet. He tries to escape but is stopped by Felix, and he's forced to fix the system. At the med bay, Baylor rewires the door lock to open it. In the hallway, he stashes some of the tanks inside a chute. Baylor then runs into Dr. Kabir and joins her to save the engineering team. Meanwhile, Jasper reveals that he's not the real Jasper Dades and that his name is Malcolm Perry. Furious, James tells Felix to arrest him. Sharon instructs Ensign Stein to find anyone with advanced coding knowledge to fix the problem. On the yard deck, Harris tells Eva that he loves her and collapses. Fortunately, Dr. Kabir and her team arrive and give them oxygen masks. Later, Ensign brings 3 crew members, including Alicia, to the bridge. Alicia figures out that the diagnostics are stuck in a Barstow loop and successfully navigates the system out of it. Sharon then orders Spencer to head outside the ship to seal the breach, which they immediately do. Afterward, Sharon happily announces that their oxygen crisis is over. At the med bay, Eva watches Dr. Kabir tend to a critically ill Harris, but he perishes. Dr. Kabir apologizes, but the mournful Eva walks away. Dr. Kabir then spots Baylor and thanks him for what he did. At the bridge, Sharon congratulates Alicia, and an impressed James promotes her as the new chief of life support. Later, Felix leads Sharon to a storage closet where Malcolm is held. He admits to hiring a hacker to reassign the real Jasper Dades to Ark 2 and explains that he just wanted to be on the first ship. Sharon reveals that the council will convene to decide his punishment and that she's pushing the death penalty on him. Shocked, Jasper tries to explain that there are other stowaways on board. When Sharon is about to shut the door, Malcolm stops her. He recounts meeting a cadet named Denise in a pub in Jacksonville, Florida, and describes witnessing a tragic event that stunned Sharon. The council assembles to discuss Malcolm's fate, and Dr. Kabir asserts that he should be allowed to defend himself. They comply and have Felix bring him in. However, he discovers Malcolm has been murdered. Sharon then goes to her room to think about what Malcolm said. The following day, Spencer and James are outside Ark One, investigating the cause of the damage. Sharon sees that some of the structure on the external wheel has separated and orders the men to flee. However, debris knocks Spencer unconscious, while their companion Skolnick is impaled to death. James brings Spencer on board the ship, and Dr. Kabir tries to resuscitate him. A dismayed James tells Sharon that he broke his promise to Skolnick's wife to keep her husband alive. Later at the med bay, Dr. Kabir tends to Spencer's concussion when Alicia arrives for her post-cryo physical. A crew member, who's been waiting over 3 hours with other patients, approaches them and complains about why Alicia needs to be examined when she's okay. She then criticizes Alicia for her promotion and tells her that she heard a rumor that Alicia killed Jasper to take over his position. Kabir instructs the crew member to sit down. Alicia then shares the rumors she heard about their ship being attacked, but the visibly annoyed Dr. Kabir lashes out and tells her to shut up, prompting Alicia to leave. Kabir then informs Spencer that she hasn't been able to sleep since they awoke from hibernation because she's the only doctor left. Spencer then orders her to lock the medical bay and get some rest before he departs. James catches up to him to explain that the structure is now holding out, and they reminisce about Skulnik. Spencer informs him that more rumors will circulate following Skulnik's death and that they have to tell the crew the truth, but James thinks they're also in the dark. Elsewhere, Alicia bumps into Baylor, who thanks her for getting him into her former position. Alicia offers to show him around the waste facility, but after realizing what she just said, the flustered Alicia walks away. Later, they hold a funeral service for the crew members that died during the oxygen crisis. Eva revisits her final moments with Harris and spits on Malcolm's corpse, which Kat witnesses. Before they dump their bodies into space, Angus stops them. He then approaches the council and requests to use the human remains as fertilizer. However, Spencer is appalled and orders them to eject the bodies, but Alicia intervenes, so Spencer questions her presence. Sharon reveals that James promoted Alicia after the oxygen crisis and reminds him they can no longer make unilateral decisions. Spencer is, once again, outvoted, infuriating him. While the rest of the body leaves, the 3 lieutenants stay behind. Sharon explains that aside from needing to fix the engines, there's now a murderer on board, and they're still unaware of what struck their ship. Overwhelmed, Spencer storms out of the room. James chases after him and says that Sharon is right about needing to know what struck them. However, Spencer is suspicious of Sharon because she never trained with them and only met her 3 days before Ark One began its journey. 5 years ago, Lieutenant Commander Susan Ingram introduced the crew to a hologram of William Trust, the man who designed the spaceship and started the Ark program. James comments that William is untrustworthy since he has a god complex and got fired from his own company because he went crazy. However, Spencer and Baylor disagree. Commander Leslie stops the recording and announces their departure, while Scorched Earth looms in the background. Later, Kat, the celebrity face of Ark One, explains to the press that she'll be sharing her experience until they go into stasis. Leslie, accompanied by Susan, meets with Spencer and Baylor and introduces them to Sharon. As Leslie and Sharon depart, Susan and Baylor briefly touch hands. Spencer then questions Susan about why Sharon is joining their team at the last minute, but the former claims it was a higher-ups decision. In the present, James realizes that Spencer has a point, and they head to their room to rest. However, the pair start arguing about who should get the quarters since there are only 2 crew sleeping chambers, and Sharon has already claimed one. Later, Felix catches Sharon trying to access the storage closet where Malcolm was murdered. Sharon explains the entrance logs have been erased, so they can't see who used them to kill Malcolm. Felix reminds her that he's conducting an investigation and everyone is a potential suspect, but Sharon feels he's accusing her. Felix asks who else has clearance high enough to erase the logs on the security pad, and she names Spencer, James, and Eva. At the storage bay, Angus sees a pipe burst and doesn't contain it in time. He tells Sharon they lost a lot of water, and he tried to look for Eva to recover it but couldn't find her. Sharon goes to the crew's sleeping quarters and discovers Eva weeping in bed. She spots Kat and asks her to help Eva. Kat then talks Eva through her grief. At the bridge, James and Spencer try to examine the camera footage from the event that woke them from hibernation, but find that the cameras shut down when it transpired. Felix then arrives to ask Spencer about where he was when Malcolm was murdered. Infuriated, Spencer tells Felix he has no right to question him and storms off. At the storage bay, Alicia assists Angus in draining the water when he finds a knife. He then deduces that it was the weapon used to kill Malcolm, as someone must have hidden it in the water tank, where it got lodged in the pipes. Later, Eva returns to her crew and instructs them to reclaim the water. Sasha tells her it's okay to take some time off to grieve, but Eva asserts that she's the only one qualified to lead them. At the bridge, James and Spencer inform Sharon they'll do another survey outside the ship. However, Sharon urges them to send someone else, as they're too important to die, but they don't listen to her. Angus meets with Felix in the mess hall to discuss the knife. Felix confirms it's the murder weapon, but before they can discuss it further, an angry crew member tries to steal Angus' water, but Felix steps in, and a fight ensues. Sharon arrives and joins the melee, where she and Felix subdue the instigators. Afterward, the 3 lieutenants discuss what to do since they don't have a brig to imprison them. Sharon points out that everyone on board is on edge, sleep-deprived, hungry, and thirsty. She believes that their anger is a symptom, and they must address the root cause. Sharon then heads to the sleeping chambers to find Kat, who names her head of ship-wide mental health. and orders her to do therapy sessions for those who need them. However, Kat objects, claiming she's unqualified, but Sharon threatens to move her to waste management. Kat reluctantly agrees, but on a few conditions. Later, James surveys the outside of the ship while Spencer monitors him. James observes that the breech looks melted and finds diamond-like substances wedged inside. He retrieves one piece, and it instantly melts his gloves, exposing his fingers to space. James rushes back inside, while Spencer pressurizes the cabin. They go to the medical bay, where Dr. Kabir tends to James. She explains that he got frostbite and assures him that his skin will grow back. Sharon then storms in, and they argue. She then surmises that their lack of sleep is causing their anger and suggests they take turns resting. Sharon then announces to the entire crew that they must take shifts to sleep. At the water storage facility, Eva insists that everyone in the engineering department must keep working. Later, James and Spencer head into their room to find Kat decorating. Much to their chagrin, Sharon gave their quarters up to Kat to use for her therapy sessions. James then heads down to Yelena's bunk and asks to sleep beside her, promising no funny business. Meanwhile, Angus offers Spencer his bed. Spencer chooses to sleep in the biofarm instead. Concurrently, Eva is dismayed that the water tank has failed to reach the desired pressure to keep it running. As Sharon lies in bed, she stares at a picture of her and a man, wishing he was there to provide counsel. Moments later, Eva calls for an emergency meeting. She informs them that her team got the water reclamation system working at 62% efficiency. However, they had to reclaim the water from other sectors, including the coolant system, buying them 2 days' worth of drinking water. With what they have left in store, Sharon says they have 4 days' worth of water in total left. Spencer then voices his complaint about the knife destroying the pipe, shocking Felix since he never told anyone where the murder weapon was found. Suddenly, they hear the engine shut down, and Eva reveals that they turned the engine coolant off, ultimately deciding that they needed a few extra days of drinking water instead of running the engines while traveling through space aimlessly.